Hastings, October 14th, 1066. Now, if you are a British person, they're always going to tell you that this was the last time that their country was invaded by a foreign power. They're certainly not taking into consideration anything like the Glorious Revolution, because they were allowed in. But the last time they were successfully invaded. And what you have after the Battle of Stamford Bridge, when William crosses the English Channel and eventually establishes himself near Hastings, Harold the Saxon has to travel the length of England to get here to stop William, because William wants to be king. And here's the deal. Harold has at his disposal about 5,000 men. Now, this is nothing in comparison to what the Romans used to be able to produce. So you've got much smaller armies. And Harold's army is primarily made up of infantry. These are guys that are wearing chainmail. Lots of times they'll have a cone-like metal hat or a helmet, and they often have it's called the Danish axe. It's a two-handed axe that they'll use, or they'll use a smaller hatchet with a shield. Sometimes they had swords. All right? These are the housecarls. And these are Harold's private army. He has supplemented his troops with regular people that he comes across because he's the king, and he says, I need regular people. And so you have the feardmen. You're just regular farmers who are now soldiers. And what Harold does is he situates himself at the top of this hill. All right? He anchors both of his flanks with rivers. The reason that you do that is so that your enemy can't cross the river and get to you. All right? It was smart. Plus, there's an advantage. He's got the high ground. Smart for defense. So Harold sets up his troops here. The feardmen are back here. They're not very well armed nor armored. Harold is right here behind this shield wall, which is kind of like an old phalanx. These guys are standing there with armor and a shield, usually with an axe or hatchet, right? And they make this huge shield wall defending the top of this hill. What has to happen is William has to somehow get up here and then head toward London. William's troops are a little bit different. All right? One of the things that you'll notice missing from here is there's no cavalry. There's no guys on horses. This is all infantry. That's a disadvantage because horses move faster than people. All right? You'll also notice this group doesn't have archers. They don't have a lot of bowmen. There just weren't a lot of them around. Right? Now, back at this point, your archers were using something called the self-bow, which is not terribly powerful. You maybe got about 100 yards out of it, and it's probably not going to pierce armor, but it's really annoying. And so what happens is William has archers on either flank. He's got his infantry, right? Very similar to these guys, except they're primarily armed with swords. And then he has cavalry back here. Now, particularly this cavalry group here with William, they were friends of his. They were members of his family. And they also wore chain armor with a slit in the middle so you could sit on a horse. And they fought with straight swords almost exclusively. All right? Even though lances had been invented, they just weren't used that often yet. A lance is like a spear that you hold and you drive into people as you ride past them. All right, very effective. Think of jousting. All right, so what happens is this. William situates himself here, and if you take a look at the number of people involved, they're roughly similar. The Normans have about 7,000 men. This is relatively modern estimates. And Harold and the English have about 5,000 men. Right? So there's an advantage for the Normans, but the Normans have to go uphill. All right? They're on the offensive. So what William decides he's going to do is he's going to launch a frontal assault. But before he does that, he wants to soften up this enemy. How does he do it? Set me up.
He uses the archers to keep them pinned down while he sends in the infantry and cavalry.
He's going to use the archers kind of like you might use artillery today to try to get the enemy's heads down. So he moves these guys up and he starts shooting. Now they're shooting uphill. The bows aren't terribly powerful. And what they noticed is it doesn't seem to be doing a lot of damage to these guys. These guys are heavily armored. It's not doing much. There's another problem that William didn't take into consideration. He orders his archers to shoot a whole bunch of arrows. The enemy is not shooting arrows back. Why? They don't have any. And so once you shoot an arrow, you don't run and go get it. Normally, the enemy shoots arrows back at you. You pick them up and you fire them back. Well, these guys aren't shooting any arrows, so eventually the archers are starting to run out of ammunition. That's a problem, right? So here's the deal. He does that. He tries to weaken them to pin them down. Then he sends in his infantry to go up and try to take this hill. They can't do it. When the infantry comes into contact with the housecarls and the shield wall, they can't seem to make a dent in it. It's too powerful. So then William calls forth his cavalry. He's like, then I'll send in the cavalry. They sweep up the hill. Now going up a hill is annoying. You're also going slower. They sweep up. They can't seem to make any headway. William is going to lose. They retreat. Now we're not 100% sure if it was a controlled retreat. We don't know. But they retreated. Some people blame the Bretons, who are on the left over here, for retreating too quickly in a cowardly fashion. We're not sure. But for whatever reason, the Normans started to retreat. As they retreated, some members of the shield wall broke and charged down the hill after William's men. Right? Very interesting situation occurred. The battle is kind of at a stalemate. Unfortunately, word spreads amongst the Normans that William has been killed. William's dead. Oh, let's get back in our boats. Time to go home. So they start to leave the battlefield. William's not dead. So he rides back and forth along the lines of battle, lifting up his helm so everyone can see, I'm not dead. Keep fighting. And so they regroup. Now this is going to take an entire day. The battle takes an entire day. They're going to break for lunch, which sounds like convenient. Let's break for lunch. And then what they decide to do is exactly the same thing. Use the archers, send in the infantry, send in the cavalry. To the exact same effect. They couldn't break through this shield wall. When they broke, members of the shield wall charged down the hill after them, and William ordered his cavalry to cut them down because they were in the open. Right? So a guy charging away from the defense of his brethren, the rest of the housecarls, when he gets down here is easy pickings for a guy on a horse. All right. You now know how to win this battle. How does William win this battle? I've told you enough. Set me up.
So he does like the same thing, and so when they chase him, his cavalry just cuts them all down until eventually the wall's gone, and then he can attack.
There you go. That's probably what you were going to say. Yeah, probably a lot of you had that idea. This is what William's going to try. Why don't we go up here, fight for a while, and then pretend that we're losing, and then run away in disarray. But you're not in disarray. You're making it look like it. It appears as if that is exactly what happened. William does exactly the same thing. Harold is like, okay, we're holding our own, no problem. Right? By this point, it's believed that Harold's two brothers have already been killed in the battle. So this is a pretty devastating battle as it is. William's lost members of his family, so it's a pretty big deal. They charge up after loosing basically the rest of their arrows, and then they fight, and then do exactly what you mentioned. They strategically withdraw. These guys are sick of this. They want an end to the battle. They're tired. They've been marching for a long time. They break ranks, even though we know that Harold had told them, don't do that. They did it anyway, and then the cavalry was able to sweep in, annihilate a large enough number of them that then they were able to break through. Now, once they broke through the shield wall, then what you have is a free-for-all. These guys are lightly armored up against horses and men who are well armored with swords. They're going to be cut to pieces. All right? We know that at some point Harold is killed. All right? We'll look at some of the documentation later, but we know he died. When he dies, these guys who aren't killed run. These guys try to leave, but the problem is they're infantry, and they're up against guys on horses. The horses ride them down, even though the housecarls fought valiantly. They fought rearguard actions. They did everything they could. They could not win this battle, and William takes the battlefield in 1066, leaving open now the way to London. That's going to give William a new name. No longer are you going to call him William the Bastard. Now he's called William what? Does anyone know?
Second.
Great.
Yeah, William the Conqueror. Cool. Good job, guys. William the Conqueror.